In September 2022, I found myself with a few spare weeks before I started a new teaching job. A part of me thought I should spend those 2 weeks resting, taking some time to have a break before I started working again. But another part of me thought of a better idea. To be honest, I had never been much of a traveller before. I was always a little bit anxious at the idea of travelling, especially on my own, because I always thought of the worst case scenario. It was a way of feeling more prepared in case the worst case scenario actually happened. Except in reality, just because I had imagined the worst case scenario playing out, it didn't make me any more prepared if that were to actually happen in real life. And in truth, I really did want to travel, so I didn't want to let this anxious part of me win. I didn't want to go through life being anxious and as a consequence not doing what I really wanted to do. And it wasn't as simple as just deciding not to be anxious anymore and then I was fine. But after thinking about it a lot, after reminding myself that we only have a limited time on this earth to live, I decided to do it anyway. I started the trip from London. My end destination was Warsaw because I was living in Warsaw at the time and teaching English, and so I planned my route from London to Warsaw. The cities I visited on the way were London, Bruges, Brussels, Nuremberg, Prague, Vienna, Budapest, Krakow, and then Warsaw. And so yes, I started the trip from London. I stayed in a hostel close to Victoria Coach Station because in the morning I would be getting an early bus from London to Bruges, and I travelled with my Interrail pass. But when I travelled from London to Bruges, I got a Flixbus because it was only £10 and I thought it sounded quite fun to get the bus across the ferry. And the hostel in London wasn't the nicest hostel. It was a bit noisy and a bit hot, and when I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning I needed a toilet, and there were 2 toilets on my floor, both of which were out of use because in one of them someone was throwing up because they had drunk too much, and in the other one the toilet was blocked. And so I had to go find toilets on a different floor, and it took quite a long time. But fortunately, after this experience, my experience in hostels only got better. I really enjoyed my experience in all the hostels I went to after this, so it was good that it improved. And yes, in the morning I got the bus to Bruges. I thought this was a very pleasant experience. The sun was coming up as the bus drove towards Dover. I was excited, my journey was beginning. At Dover, I spoke to a girl who was on the same bus. She was living in London but was from Belgium, and she was taking the bus to Bruges to visit her family again. She was sitting at the very front of the bus in what I would say were the nicest seats, and I was sat in the back of the bus where it was quite cramped and hot, and she invited me to come up to the front and sit next to her, which was very kind of her. And we spent time on the ferry together. We went to the shops and we sat on the deck together, and she took this photo of me. And once we arrived in Bruges, we exchanged numbers, but as life is sometimes, we didn't really speak to each other again after that. But I really enjoyed doing that journey with her. And yes, then I was in Bruges. I really enjoyed the time I spent in Bruges. I saw some sights from the film In Bruges, quietly laughing to myself. I hired a bike and cycled along the canals. I was feeling more confident now. I had made it to Bruges on my own. I still had my purse, my passport, my bag. I was having fun. I felt this new sense of freedom which continued for all of the trip. Then, a couple of days after arriving in Bruges, I was on the road again. The next stop was Brussels, then Nuremberg, then Prague. I had waffles in Brussels, German sausages in Nuremberg, and this ice cream pastry tower in Prague. I was getting more used to being in hostels now, and I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Although I love meeting new people, sometimes I do like some time on my own to recharge, and I thought being in a hostel setting it wouldn't really be possible to do that. However, in every hostel I stayed in, the bunk beds had curtains, so it was possible to have some time on your own and make up your own little small room. I also met lots of different people from staying in hostels. I met one girl in Prague. She was from Berlin but had come to Prague for a weekend away on her own, and she recommended this really lovely cafe in Prague with these really high bookshelves and really good hot chocolate. I also met this man who was travelling to lots of different cities in Europe and staying in them for a week, so he could really try to understand what it would be like to live in those cities. And I met people from loads of different countries, and it was really interesting to listen to them and learn more about where they were from and why they were travelling. It really reminded me of how big the world is. And after Prague, I went to Vienna. This was one of my favourite cities on the trip. I stayed in an Airbnb here because I had to attend some online meetings for the new job I had, and I stayed with a woman who was born in Vienna and had lived her whole life in Vienna, and she taught French at a school in the city. Because she had always lived in Vienna, she knew the city really well, and she recommended some really nice places to eat and some really nice places to visit. One of my favourite places I went to when I was in Vienna was the Palace. I took the train there and explored the grounds on my own. I spent some time writing up on the hill, looking over at the palace. The sun was also shining and there were lots of opportunities to people watch, and it was just a very peaceful and warm experience. I also tried some schnitzel and some Saar-Torte cake in Vienna, which were both really good. The next city was Budapest. I took a walk on the Danube River. I don't really know how to pronounce it, but the river that runs through Vienna and Budapest. And I had a more quiet time in Budapest. It was only really me staying in the hostel room where I was staying, which was quite nice, and I watched Before Sunrise in my hostel as it was set in Vienna where I had just been, and it was really nice to see the two characters going to places that I had been in Vienna, and I also just really loved that movie. And then after 2 nights in Budapest, I took a 9-hour train to Krakow. I thought this might be quite boring, but I actually really enjoyed the 9-hour train ride from Budapest to Krakow. There was so much beautiful scenery to see, and I watched Pride and Prejudice on my laptop. And when I arrived in Krakow, my partner was there to meet me. We lived in Warsaw together, so he took the train down from Warsaw to meet me in Krakow. And then the next day, we took the train together back to Warsaw. And then my trip was over. So to finish this video, if you're asking yourself, should I go travelling on my own? I would say the answer is yes. It can be challenging at times, but it's also so much fun. You get to meet lots of different people, you get to learn more about lots of different cities. The world feels so large and exciting. Ever since I went travelling on my own, I feel a lot more confident and comfortable within myself. I feel much more confident in my ability to do things. So I would say if you're thinking about going travelling on your own, just go. Don't overthink it too much, just book that train ticket and go.